Hello students, we are reading the guidance and counseling course and now we are entering to the week number 6 where we are going to discuss different types of the test. And in lecture number 1, first of all we will try to understand the characteristics of a good measuring tool. Highlights of this lecture are, first of all we introduce the concept and then we will learn the characteristic features of a good measuring tool and we will delve into the validity, reliability, objectivity, norms, practicability, discriminating power, economic aspect as well as conclusion. Now we are discussing our topic. A good measuring tool refers to any instrument such as test. It can be a test, it can be a scale, it can be a questionnaire, it can be an inventory or a checklist. Any instrument that consistently and accurately measures what it intended to measure. That is the good measuring tool. The purpose of the measuring tool is to measure. If the tool is measuring in its true sense without accurately without any error, in the field of guidance and counseling, the purpose of a measuring tool is to gather accurate, reliable and relevant data about the individual's abilities, interests, personalities, traits, attitudes, emotional state and behavior pattern. Because appraisal of the individual occupies even important positions in the guidance and counseling and conducting researches in the field of education. So what kind of tools the researcher or the counselor should use in identifying the characteristic features of the individual? That is basically very important to learn on the part of the counselor and the researcher. Characteristics of a good measuring tool: a number and variety of standardized tests available to counselors and researchers today require a recognition and application of appropriate criteria in test selection. Broadly speaking, a good standardized test or tool must possess the following characteristic features, and these characteristic features are: number 1, validity; number 2, reliability; number 3, objectivity; number 4, it must follow certain norms and it should be practical in its application, and it also demonstrate discriminating power and economical in nature. So we will discuss each and every aspect in a little bit more detail so that things become clear in the minds of individual as well as the counselor what is expected when we are going to select a good and reliable measuring tool. Number 1 is validity. First of all, we will try to understand the concept of the validity. And we will take the example of one definition given by Anastasi. It is a very popular definition regarding the validity. Validity is the degree to which a test actually measures what it purports or supposed to measure. Actual measurement by any instrument is basically called the validity. The purpose of measurement must be solved. That is the concept of the validity. Validity is directly related to the content and the form of the test. It means a valid test is that test which measures the characteristic features for which it was designed. So we have designed some tool or the measurement, and for certain purposes, if that purposes are not being utilized or solved, then that test cannot be considered as a valid test. Now, definition of validity. According to the Freeman, an index of validity shows the degree to which a test measures what it purports to measure. when compared with accepted criteria. There are already criteria available. If it follows that criteria, near to that criteria, then we can consider the test as valid test. So, in order to understand on the meaning of the validity on the basis of the definition given by the experts of the field, if a researcher or the counselor uses intelligence test for the purpose of categorizing the students based on different intellectual abilities, then the test should be able to measure the intelligence of the students. It does not fulfill, if it does not fulfill this function, then it will be termed as invalid and will be useless. Because if you are going to test the intelligence and want to categorize the individual in three broader categories: high achievers, average intelligence students, or below intelligence student, then we need to measure in actual sense the intelligence. Only then we will be able to categorize, and we can rely on the results of the researchers based on that. A test, however, may be valid for use in one situation but invalid if used in another situation. It can be said that the test does not possess universal or eternal validity. Does not possess universal or eternal validity. A test can be valid to one situation, may not be valid to the another situation. So, the determination of the validity is essential for its use in any worthwhile purpose. A test can be valid to one situation, it means, and may not be valid to another situation. It means we need to ensure validity in every new situation. There are many types of the validity. According to Anastasi 1988 and Kaplan and Secuzzo 1982, there are three types of validity. Number one, content validity. Number two, construct validity. And number three, criterion based validity. So, what is content validity? Content validity is also referred to as face validity. More importantly, content validity is concerned with whether the test includes a fair sample of universe of factors it is supposed to assess. As a general rule, content validity is associated with achievement, aptitude, and ability tests. Things will be clear with this slide. It refers to correspondence between the content of the test and the content of the material to be tested. It is true that test cannot incorporate all the elements of the content to be tested, but the selected content in the test should be reasonable sample and representative of the total content to be tested. In a simple word, we can say that content validity is basically related to covering the all aspects for which we are preparing the measuring tool. We can simply take the example of any test where we want to conduct a test on any academic achievement on any particular paper. Suppose there are 4 units in that paper, then content validity is basically associated if we are selecting the questions from 4 units and representation of every aspect is incorporated in that. We can take the example of the various component of the academic anxiety. Academic anxiety can be related to the family, related to the individual, related to the school conditions. Then we have to incorporate all the elements which are associated to that and select the questions and incorporate in a test, and then we can say it is a content validity test because it has the content, true representation of the content although it is very difficult to incorporate all the content, but that is not possible. So in such a situation, we are taking a representative sample of the content so that all the aspects are covered in that. So content validity must be understood in that aspect. Another important thing is that construct validity. What is construct validity? Construct validity, the most general type of validity, is the extent to which the test may be said to measure the theoretical construct or trait. It purports to measure constructs such as anxiety or intelligence. These are basically the constructs. It is thus not concerned only with the test itself, but also with the theory which seeks to explain the results which are obtained when the test is used. In a simple word, we can say that the construct validity is basically related to the construct. Means we are taking the we are analyzing the anxiety or preparing a anxiety test or an intelligence test, but we are taking the theoretical background of that test and aspects which are associated to that theoretical background, which may be given in the form of any definition of the anxiety or the intelligence or the self-concept or any confidence level, whatever construct we are using, we have to ensure that all aspects of the theoretical background have been covered in the test. That test is called the construct validity. Criterion based validity is very common and popular type of test validity. Another third type of validity is criterion based validity. What is it? Criterion based validity is a very common and popular type of test validity. It is also referred to as empirical validity, because empirically we try to justify the criterion based validity by using the statistical techniques. It refers to a correspondence between the results of the subject in question and the results obtained from outside criteria. Outside criteria is usually a measurement device for which validity is already established. Take for example, the already standardized test of academic anxiety is available and you are preparing another academic anxiety test, and you are conducting both the test and evaluating the scores and making a correlation between the scores, your scores and the scores which can be obtained on already prepared and standardized tests available in the market. If there is a correlation between the scores, that is called the criterion based validity. We are judging the tool or the measurement based on standard criteria which is already present. In a more clear way, we can understand the criterion based validity. Intelligence tests in the beginning first were validated against school grades, ratings for aptitudes by the teachers and other indices of the ability, because in the beginning no standardized criteria was present. So in order to prepare the intelligence test, in order to fulfill the criterion based validity, these intelligence tests were compared with the students' grades and the observation of the teachers, so that we can compare the results and find out the criterion based validity. These validity are of two types: predictive validity and concurrent validity. What is predictive validity and what are concurrent validity? We can understand with the help of this explanation which is presented in this slide. Predictive validity is also called statistical validity or empirical validity, in which a test is correlated against a criteria to be made available after sometimes in future. Okay, you have prepared the test and you want to validate it, and in that validation you have to wait for some periods. As far as the current validity is concerned, current validity is related to the situation in which there is no time gap in obtaining test scores and criterion scores. Predictive validity can be expected. Take for example any student who has entered in teaching profession by going through the teaching aptitude test. After getting the employment, we are analyzing his performance and we are correlating his performance with the aptitude which he or she has demonstrated before entering the profession. So with this we can understand that if we are selecting the engineers, we are selecting the doctors by application of certain tests, those characteristic features will be demonstrated by the individual that is related to the future. But concurrent validity is basically no time gap is given in that and we are using it against any criteria. Second important aspect is reliability. So the second major criteria to be applied in standardized test selection is reliability. Definition of the reliability again given by the Anastasi in 1968. Reliability refers to the consistency of scores obtained by the same individuals when re-examined with tests on different occasions or with different tests of equivalence items under other available examination conditions. So reliability is basically related to the scores. We are conducting the test twice and correlating their scores and comparing their scores. If there is a high correlation between these scores, then we can say that the test is reliable. What is the meaning of the reliability in a common word? It is important to keep in mind that perfect reliability does not exist. No test can provide you the perfect reliability. A test score is called reliable when we have some reason for achieving the scores to be stable and trustworthy. Stability and trustworthiness depend upon the degree to which the score is an index of true ability, is free from chance error. So a score is called reliable when we have some reason for believing the scores to be stable and trustworthy. Let us understand in a better manner. Repeated measures of an attribute or characteristics by a test may produce different results. This change in results may be because of the two reasons. That is, it may be due to the change in behavior of the student or the respondent or to the unreliability of the test item. What can be understood regarding reliability in a common word? We are conducting a test on any student population and after 15 days we are conducting the test again. We are evaluating their performance and giving some scores. In second chance also we are giving the score and on the basis of that we are finding there is no significant difference between the scores obtained by the respondents. In this way we can say that the test is reliable. We can rely on this test if it is conducted on repeated times on the individual. Discrepancy in scores due to change in the behavior has nothing to do with the reliability, because change in behaviors may be because of the addition of the knowledge. That is not basically related to the reliability. However, if the variation is due to the test itself, then the reliability of the test is doubtful. It is also clear that reliability refers to the scores and not related to the content or form of the test. Content and the form of the test is basically the concept of the validity. A test can be reliable, but it cannot be valid. But a valid test will always be reliable. We need to understand this. Methods of reliability, there are various methods of reliability, and first is the test retest method. The same test is given again after a period of time and we are comparing the scores of first time obtained by the population and the second time obtained by the population. That is the test retest reliability, and finding out the correlation between these two types of the scores by using the statistical methods. Parallel form means two equivalent forms of the test are administered. Two forms we have got. Take for example, we have taken the parallel forms of reliability of intelligence test, and we are conducting and getting the scores from that, or preparing the two parallel forms, and we are getting the two scores from the from the population of or the respondents, and we are comparing them. It is parallel forms of reliability. Split half technique, the test divided into two equal halves. Rational equivalence means two forms of the test are defined as equivalent when corresponding items are interchangeable. Any of the above mentioned method may be applied as per the need of the test used by the researcher. If we are using the test-retest method or parallel form methods or split half technique, generally in research purposes, we are using the split half technique because it is quite easy. We are dividing the whole questions into two halves, either by selecting the odd questions in one part and the even question in another part, or dividing the 100, take for example there are 100 questions, first 50 questions in the first half and the first 60 question in the second half, and we are taking the scores and paralleling the scores or comparing the scores by using the reliability coefficient. Then we are coming to the objectivity. A test that is objective measures without reference to outside influences. Irrelevant, unrelated factors do not influence the test results if a test is objective. So, objectivity is very important. Let us understand objectivity in more clear manner. Objectivity addresses the question if the data collection is independent of person involved in the data collection and independent of the devices used. If a test is objective, it can be administered by anyone, and it can be administered by using any device. The results will be objective. There will not be the element of subjectivity involved in that. That kinds of the test are called the objective test. A good test must have the trait of objectivity, that is, must be free from subjective elements. We need to ensure that there should not be subjectivity in evaluation of the student's personality. If the subjectivity will be involved, then it will be very difficult to implement the interventions on the part of the counselor and to achieve the desired results. So, test qualities are very important. Objectivity relates to two aspects of the test. Number one, objectivity of the items. Objectivity of the item is meant that items should be phrased in such a manner that they are interpreted exactly in the same way by all the respondents. The question must be clear. The language should not be ambiguous. What meaning I am drawing with that test item, all individuals or all other respondents are equally deriving the same meaning from that. That is the item objectivity. Clarity, conciseness and clarity in the meaning is important aspect. Objectivity of scoring, that is the another criteria of an objectivity test. It can be judged by scoring of different experts. Less discrepancy in scores of the different subject indicates the objectivity. If any test is evaluated by several examiners and we are analyzing the scores given by these examiners, if there is no discrepancy or little discrepancy on the part of the examiners, it ensures that the test is objective. If there is deviation in their marks given or allotted by the examiner, it indicates that an element of subjectivity is involved in the measuring tool. So, variation in marks awarded by the different experts indicate the elements of subjectivity in scoring process. The administration, scoring and interpretation of scores. should all be independent of subjective judgment of the individual examiners. So administration should be also objective, scoring should also be reflected in objective manner, and its interpretation is also based on the objectivity. Now we are coming to the norms. Norms or average performance scores for specified groups make meaningful comparisons among people in regard to what can be expected. There are four types of the norms: age norms, grade norms, percentile norms, and standard score norms that can be selected by the researcher in standardization process. The norms should have been derived from the sample of the individual who are comparable to the individual for whom the counselor wishes to use it. We cannot use the norms of one situation to the another deviant situation. It needs to be in our mind. Norms are established on certain population and cannot be applied to the population having different nature and characteristics as cannot be considered comparable groups. Norms can be applied on the comparable groups. I will explain this point. For example, by taking the example, if a test constructed has established norms, age norms, percentile norms, on the minority population living in rural areas, then these may not be applicable to the majority population living in urban areas. So you are preparing a test in solving certain purposes and designing the norms accordingly, scoring norms and categorization into different categories, then we have to take into account that these norms will be applicable to the relevant population who are showing the similar characteristic features, similar age group, and similar temperament and similar other characteristic features. It is therefore essential that thorough scrutiny of the norms of a test should be done before it is used by the counselor or any other researcher. It is advisable to use self-made tools and develop the norms selecting the similar population. If the norms cannot be applied to the another population, then it is better on the part of the counselor and the researcher to derive the norms and use it. Another important aspect is practicability. It is very important characteristic features of the standardized test. A test can be valid and reliable, but if it lacks of practicability, then it will be of no use for the counselor and the researcher. There are few things which ensures the usability of any test, and these are availability of the trained personnel for its administration, for its scoring and its interpretation. If scoring is conducted in a perfect manner, administration is done by following the rules and regulations and the norms, and interpretation is done, then we can get the better results. Practicability is also associated to the cost of the instruments and accompanying material. It is also related to the simple to understand and ease in administration, scoring and interpretation even by untrained persons. So if the test is being used by untrained person, then it must be practicable in nature and there is no difficulty in administering that. It should be interesting and enjoyable for the respondents. Discriminating power, it is the characteristics of the test to discriminate between superior and inferior in regard to the performance of the respondents on the test is concerned. A test may possess positive discriminating power, negative discriminating power, or non-discriminating power. Either it is not discriminating between the superior and the inferior student or high achievers or the low achievers. So the discriminating power is basically related to the test characteristic features where the test is clearly categorizing the individual into different categories. In other words, we can say that the normal probability curve is being followed. And in last, economical aspect is also very important. A measurement tool should be less time consuming. The cost of the test must be reasonable so that the schools, educational institutions can afford to purchase and use. So economical means in terms of effort, in terms of its application, in terms of responding to that. If the test is highly costly, very costly, then students will not be able to buy it, educational institution will not be able to possess it, and it will lose its reliability. Let us conclude our discussion. In guidance and counseling, using good measuring tool ensures that decisions based on assessment are fair. We need to understand this concept until and unless we are using the tools which are reliable, highly valid, following certain norms, and they are having the ability to discriminate the population, they are practicable in nature and they are economic in nature, then we will not be able to evaluate the true personality of the student, and the task of the counseling will be highly difficult. So it is very important to understand the characteristic features of the good measuring tools before conducting the appraisal of the student and engaging the students in the counseling process. So students, with this we have completed our discussion on factors, on characteristics features of a good measuring tool. Thanks for your patience hearing, and God bless you.